Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz here in our Northwest Side studio.
And I'm Brandis Friedman reporting live from West Suburban Woodridge.
On the show tonight, following a botched raid by police on social worker Anjanette Young's home last year, Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul assesses new search warrant guidelines by Chicago police.
It was a lot of neighbors' homes. It was just everybody. It was devastating.
How Woodridge is recovering and rebuilding after Sunday's tornado. Next stop for our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series. A compromise on the proposal to rename Lakeshore Drive DuSable Drive. That and more following yesterday's chaotic city council meeting.
We're black and we're unapologetically Catholic.
The story of Corpus Christi Catholic Church, one of several Southside parishes, closing its doors this month due to consolidations. Researchers explore the powerful connection between music and memories. That and more from the world of science. Jeffrey Bayer unpacks the secrets behind Chicago's street grid in this week's Ask Jeffrey.
Not fond of your tie.
Well, good.
And as the sartorially splendid Phil Ponce gets set to switch from regular weekly appearances to special assignments at the end of the month, we relive some more Ponce moments.
Always a fan of Ponce moments, as Paris. As we mentioned, I am in Woodridge, where I'll be co-anchoring tonight as part of our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series. You know, this community was pretty hard hit by Sunday night's tornado, but in the days following, this community of neighbors and residents, they've really been coming together, distributing meals, some of them picking meals up here from the West Suburban Community Pantry. So we'll have more from the organizers here at the Pantry, as well as the mayor and some of those neighbors on how they're recovering. But for now, Paris, back to you.
All right, Brandis, we look forward to that. And now to some of today's top stories. Cook County officials tout an improving fiscal outlook for the county as COVID subsides. Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle unveiled the county's preliminary budget forecast for 2022 today. It projects a budget shortfall of $121 million. That's a figure that's 70% smaller than a year ago when the pandemic raged. The county finds itself in a better position thanks to $1 billion in federal COVID relief funds and an improving economy. In fact, Cook County is projected to end this fiscal year with a $60 million budget surplus. And Preckwinkle is also announcing she is appointing the county's chief medical examiner to a second 5-year term. Dr. Pani Arunkumar was first appointed in 2016. Preckwinkle praised Arunkumar's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic and a spike in opioid overdoses in a statement today. The appointment has been confirmed by the Cook County Board of Commissioners. The United Center mass vaccination site is shutting down thanks to vastly improved COVID-19 numbers and a drop-off in demand. The Chicago Department of Public Health reports that more than 20% of the city's COVID-19 vaccine doses came from city-run sites like the United Center. A more local operation will take its place across the street at Malcolm X College. Another city-run site at Chicago State University is still open right now for walk-in appointments until Saturday, July 3rd. Days after a major tornado ripped through west suburban DuPage County, more storms are expected this evening. The village of Woodridge in particular was hit hard by that EF3 tornado that sent residents into their basements Sunday night. But today the community is out picking up the pieces. Brandis Friedman spent the day reporting in Woodridge as part of our Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series. Brandis, what kind of weather are we expecting there tonight?
Well, Paris, I'm told, thankfully, nothing severe. Certainly nothing as severe as what they saw Sunday night. But the Weather Service is predicting storms, some thunderstorms. It did rain here for a good bit of the day today, not so much at the moment. And we're going to get into the impact of, all of that rain, as well as the impact of that rain on the drought coming up later on. But it is going to be a long road for some members of this community. Obviously, plenty of downed trees here. You can see the storm's track just by following a series of tree trunks with no top branches. They were either torn off during the storm or cut down for safety. The housing damage here is substantial as well. More than 160 homes receiving major damage, more than 30 homes a total loss. And we spoke with one neighbor who volunteers at her church parish, St. Scholastica, about what that damage was like Monday morning.
And then the next morning, I got up early and saw, I wanted to assess the damage to my house. Nothing. but I had all this drywall in my front yard. And I'm like, where's the drywall coming from? So I walk out a block and a half, and then, yeah.
Is it a neighbor's home?
It was a lot of neighbors' homes. It was just everybody. It was devastating.
Now, Jennifer Antilles, she is a self-described take charge kind of person, and she took it upon herself to organize the food donations here in the St. Scholastica School gym, making bags of meals for anyone who needs it, volunteers, neighbors, using food donated by the food pantry. And she's been working to get the word out that it's available. The church has had plenty of volunteers of its own since it too received substantial damage. The rectory and garage were totaled except for 2 brick walls. There was also a bit of roof damage. The church's director of religious education points out a lesson from one of the religious teachers there, that the emotional recovery may take longer than the physical.
We are okay. Physically, we are okay. You know, the emotional part of it will come as the physical buildings and things have to recover, but for right now, I'm okay. And that's one thing we have to remember, that there's going to be residual, you know, and that's why I want to tell people our church doors are open now for Mass. So that's a place where you can start healing.
And one theme that I have noticed emerge from my conversations with folks in the community here is just how much they have shown up for one another. This includes about 35 American Red Cross volunteers who were called up, some of them in the middle of the night, Sunday night. This group created a makeshift overnight shelter here at the local junior high school, where only one resident has needed to stay overnight, even celebrating her birthday with the volunteers. The fact that so few were in need of shelter, emergency shelter, shows that many people who lost their homes were likely staying with friends or family. Volunteers have also been delivering hundreds of meals per day and providing access to food, water, even Wi-Fi at the junior high school. Communications Director Holly Baker points out that even though some of these volunteers have seen so many disasters, each one is different.
Each disaster is unique in its own way and is different. So no matter how many tornadoes, hurricanes, floods you've seen, every single one is big, is different, and is big to the people going through it.
Now, of course, as we mentioned, the last thing this community needs is any more severe weather. We spoke with College of DuPage meteorologist Paul Servatka, and as I mentioned earlier, not predicting any severe storms tonight or severe weather, but there is the likelihood for some potential flooding and thunderstorms.
We are looking at a pretty significant flood potential over the next 7 days, with some models coming in with 5 to 7 inches of rain.
What does that do for our drought problem?
Well, that should mitigate or completely end the hydrologic drought. You don't want to have too much at one time, but as far as just the deficit of precipitation, we'll erase that pretty rapidly.
Now, Servatka says that he's been studying the smaller tornadoes in the Chicago area, you know, the ones that usually rate about an EF0 or an EF1, the weaker ones. But he says the conditions Sunday night were just right to create the stronger one, leaving the damage that we've seen this week.
This event had a very strong circulation. The radar signature indicated a very significant tornado. And so when we see the EF2 and EF3 damage, which is abundant from Naperville through Woodridge, it doesn't surprise me. It was just tragic that it occurred at such an awful time. You know, in the evening hours, a lot of people had gone to bed, so they weren't really prepared for it.
Servatka also says that he has heard from many residents that they did not hear the tornado sirens going off Sunday night. He points out those sirens are outdoor warnings so that people who are outside when the siren goes off, they know to take cover or to get inside. He also points out they're not as audible, especially if you're inside during the storm, when the storm is creating so much noise, versus when you might hear them on a Tuesday when things are clear and they're being tested. He advises residents to be sure you have another way to receive alerts, perhaps the emergency alert system that many of us got on our phones Sunday night. But he says a weather radio really is the best way to do that. Paris, we're going to have more coming up later on. Of course, we'll be hearing from the mayor of the village of Woodridge. But for now, back to you.
Thanks, Brandis. Illinois' Attorney General has been outspoken about the pace of reform at the Chicago Police Department, sometimes drawing the ire of Mayor Lightfoot. A recent Watchdog report highlighted the numerous blown deadlines as the police department struggles to keep up with the consent decree partially being enforced by Raoul's office. And public uproar over a wrongful raid on social worker Anjanette Young's home last year has added to that frustration. And joining us to share his perspective on policing and other issues is Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul. Welcome back to Chicago tonight. First, with that botched raid of Anjanette Young, the mayor put out some revised search warrant policies, put some protections in place, but does not eliminate no-knock warrants. You called this policy insufficient. How so?
Yeah, well, first of all, with all policies, I think it's important to have a lot of public input. And so process is important as well as substance. So public engagement is important, as well as engagement with our office. In formulating policy, because we are in the midst of the implementation of a consent decree. And so while the city takes a posture that the consent decree doesn't have the specific word search warrant in it, it does speak to engaging with the public, engaging with children and so forth. And these are the elements that were involved with Anjanette Young and many search warrants. One of the critical things that's really highlighted by the situation with Anjanette Young is I think she indicated some 43 times that the officers were in the wrong place. There needs to be placed in policy as to what you do when it's clear that you're in the wrong place. Something to expedite terminating presence in somebody's home that you shouldn't be in the first place. There needs to be placed in policy what you do to deal with interactions with children. That needs to be placed in policy going.
And a lot of these wrongful raids have impacted children. They've been in homes with children, witnessing them. Yeah,
and then you highlighted in your introduction the issue of no-knock warrants, which we've seen in different jurisdictions, the impact of that. I think we can ban no-knock warrants, and that doesn't mean it's important not to fall into this false dichotomy that, if you put in place such policy, you won't be able to pursue criminals who are in homes. That's not the case. You can ban no-knock warrants, yet still be able to continue to do effective policing.
And as we said, these new policies do not ban no-knock warrants. And are you saying that the mayor's office has not at least sought input from your office in formulating some of these policies?
Well, I mean, for some of the policies, we've seen progress from where we were. I think it's important to take the approach that while we may be adversaries in the caption of a case that has led to the consent decree, our intent is to work collaboratively towards constitutional policing, towards safety for officers and for safety for the public at large.
Right.
And so we don't seek to be adversaries.
And as we mentioned, your office is the one enforcing that consent decree, and there's the independent monitor, Maggie Hickey, as well, who came out with a report saying the department has failed to meet, at this point, about 40% of the deadlines in complying with that decree. Has it gotten any better?
Yes, there has been progress. There has been progress. We still have a ways to go. One of the things that, as a note of recognition of the challenge that the mayor has taken on, she inherited a problem. In her first year, she had 3 different superintendents, and there's been change in leadership at the top of the department. And that's going to cause a lag. And then we've had a pandemic thrown in the mix as well. So, I appreciate that there have been obstacles to implementation. That aside, I think we can continue to improve on the process. It's important to not look at this as a box-checking process. There needs to be a fulsome investment in working our way towards constitutional policing that can restore the public's trust and create greater cooperation between the public and law enforcement to fight crime in Chicago.
And the mayor and the police superintendent also put out new policies on foot pursuits in the wake of the shooting deaths of Toledo and Alvarez. Do those policies go far enough, because again, they limit foot pursuit, but they don't entirely ban them for a lot of cases.
Yeah, and it's important, Paris, to recognize that this was recommended by the Attorney General under the Loretta Lynch under the Obama's administration when she issued her report on the Chicago Police Department. So this is something that should have been embraced really prior to Mayor Lightfoot coming into place, prior to Superintendent Brown. It should have been embraced at the outset of our consent decree. There was resistance to including the policy as part of the consent decree, yet we were able to get language that gave the monitor the authority to mandate a policy, which she did in March after evaluating data, and that the city took upon it on their own after two incidents, the Adam Toledo and Anthony Alvarez incident, to quickly draft a policy. We were able to have some input, as well as a monitor to have input on that policy after the first draft. And as a result of that input, I think it's improved. We still need some work, and we're hopeful that with community engagement and our engagement, we can improve it.
We only have a little bit of time left, but I want to get to some other issues. You know, part of your office is consumer protection, monitoring utility rates and looking out for consumers. The lawmakers have debated this energy bill that in part gives hundreds of millions in subsidies to Exelon to prop up some of their nuclear plants. Is this bill fair to ratepayers?
You know, the ultimate question is dependent on where they finally end, right? You know, where our input has come in is to try to protect the impact on ratepayers. There's a balancing act that goes on with this. There are a lot of jobs at risk with this, and we're in a transition, you know, not only in Illinois but throughout the country on how and what we rely on for energy, and so that's going to be a difficult process. As part of this, you know, there is a repayment of tax money to the ratepayers that, you know, should be accelerated, and it should be accelerated independent of this deal, this legislation, and that's been our posture for a long time. We'll continue to advocate on behalf of the ratepayers so that there's less burden on the ratepayer.
All right. Our thanks to Attorney General Kwame Raoul. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Paris.
And up next, a Bronzeville church that became a landmark for Black Catholics prepares for its final Mass. So please stay with us. Next month, the latest wave of Chicago area Catholic church consolidations will take place, and it'll merge parishes as part of the Archdioceses of Chicago's Renew My Church initiative. Among them will be 5 churches in and around Bronzeville. They are Corpus Christi, St. Anselm, St. Ambrose, St. Elizabeth, and Holy Angels. As Chicago Tonight's Quinn Myers reports, that unification is prompting questions about the fate of the historic church buildings and the future of Black Catholicism in the city.
Corpus Christi Catholic Church looms over King Drive in Bronzeville, where it has stood at 49th Street since 1914. For Katie Williams Hall, the church has been a fixture in her family for almost as long, since Corpus Christi opened its doors to Black Chicagoans in the early 1930s.
Since my grandfather joined in the 30s, there's been someone from the family, or several someones from the family, who've been members of the parish.
Williams Hall was baptized at Corpus Christi, got married here, and raised her children in the church. And just a few weeks ago, her granddaughter and great-nephew were baptized here, too.
I know it doesn't mean much to them now, but hopefully in the future, understanding that they're the 5th generation of a family that has, you know, belonged to a church and helped build up this church over the years, I hope that that will be exciting and meaningful to them.
For decades, Corpus Christi was a bustling parish, once home to around 3,000 members. It operated a grammar school and even a credit union that gave loans to Black Chicagoans when most banks wouldn't. But this Sunday, Williams Hall and her family will attend their final Mass at the church. For the last time, They'll pray and sing under the soaring vault ceiling, designed by Daniel Burnham apprentice Joseph William McCarthy. On July 1st, Corpus Christi and 4 other churches serving predominantly black communities on the south side are set to be unified into one. According to the Archdiocese, there just aren't enough Catholics in the area anymore to support that many parishes. The 5 parishes will now call this building home, Holy Angels Catholic Church on Oakwood Boulevard, which will be renamed Our Lady of Africa. For Corpus Christi members, the move will be bittersweet, but not exactly a surprise.
As beautiful as this church is, it's expensive to maintain. You know, the heating bill, the water, electricity. As you can see, there's some water damage that's happened to this church, and it's expensive when you have a dwindling congregation.
Larry Cope is another lifelong Corpus Christi parishioner and also the church's historian. He understands it's no longer feasible for the expansive church to operate as a standalone parish. But both he and Williams Hall are concerned about what will happen to the building after the final Mass. Its walls are lined with ornate stained glass windows and Stations of the Cross paintings, several of which have been recently restored.
I'm very concerned about this church, and again, the other churches, like particularly St. Ambrose and St. Anselm's in Corpus Christi are the larger, older churches like this. And it's like, you know, what's going to happen to them? These were major institutions in the community, and are those buildings just going to be sitting there vacant?
In response to questions from WTTW News, a spokesperson for the Archdiocese says there are no specific plans for Corpus Christi at the moment, and in a statement wrote that after churches are closed, quote, "The properties are secured and sacred items or otherwise important or particularly valuable items are removed and centrally stored to be relocated later to another parish within the Archdiocese of Chicago or another diocese." Overall, Cope says he's rooting for the parish merger to be successful, but says black Catholics in Chicago need more support to grow and flourish.
We're black and we're unapologetically Catholic in an area that has every other Christian denomination. Even though we're a small community amongst all of our other Christian brethren, we have a voice that needs to be heard and needs to still be present in this neighborhood.
And Katie Williams Hall says she'll be attending Mass at Our Lady of Africa, even if it won't be quite the same.
We've been attending church all our lives as a family for the most part. So I hope that we can at least continue that.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Quinn Myers.
And Corpus Christi members say they're hoping an institution or museum takes an interest in the church's stained glass and Station of the Cross paintings. And the Archdiocese of Chicago says St. Elizabeth will serve as a heritage center for Father Augustus Tolton, who escaped slavery to become the first recognized black Catholic priest in the United States. And now we check back in with Brandis Friedman, who spent the day reporting in Woodridge as part of our In Your Neighborhood series. Brandis.
In Paris, earlier today, I spoke with Gina Cunningham. She is the mayor of the village of Woodridge, and I began by asking her what recovery has been like this week for her community.
After the initial devastation and seeing all the destruction throughout the community, which was extremely gut-wrenching, today I know it's a new day. So in driving through Woodridge, you know, you still see some debris and the houses that are demolished, or half a house might be standing. But from Monday to today, it is incredible. The cleanup work, power is restored 100% throughout Woodridge. There's still some pockets that may need, you know, to go back and be taken care of, some individual homes. But I'm so proud of where we're at today, and now we're really concentrating on helping our neighbors.
How would you describe, or what do you know? What have your staff, your team told you about the extent of the damage?
Well, since Monday morning, very early, I had been going out in the community myself, as well as every evening, trying to go and visit neighborhoods that have been impacted And I've seen for myself the loss. You know, you may pull up and see like a subdivision that looks like it wasn't hit at all, and yet you go back to a street and it's unbelievable, the damage.
And how many homes?
So a total, you know, and I have some figures. So we have checked as a village about 900 homes. And out of that number, we know that approximately 30 are total losses, which is devastating. And then in addition to that, we have about 400 homes that have been impacted, and out of that number, about 160 have significant damage.
The folks that we've spoken with today, you know, we've heard certainly an overarching theme of, you know, residents, neighbors helping each other and coming together, and I'm getting more of a sense of that from you right now as well. But what is the city doing? What can the city do to help support these neighbors?
Well, we have reached out, and actually we've been fortunate to have people reaching out to us, such as the Woodridge Rotary. And I happen to have been a charter member of our Rotary Club, and I'm now an honorary member, and it's near and dear to my heart because of this exact outreach. They immediately stepped in. They helped restaurants go pack lunches, deliver hot food at night. It's just tremendous. And the neighbors helping neighbors is something that is so important to us. And I see it every single day when I'm out. The other day I was kind of stuck in some traffic with some trucks that were doing some repair work on a street called Everglade here, which was hit very hard. A lot of damage and tree loss, which is significant to us, being that we are a Tree City USA community. But as I was kind of stuck in traffic there a little bit, I see a gentleman across the street bringing up branches to his parkway, and he looks over and he sees a neighbor, which I didn't see that neighbor, struggling to bring a large branch up. He dropped what he was doing, cut right in front of my car, and went and helped his neighbor bring over, I think, about 6 branches I saw while I was waiting there. You know, just even in your own need, outreaching to help a neighbor, and that is throughout Woodridge. Neighbors who are offering and opening up their homes, etc.
And, you know, in about 3 minutes, this West Suburban Community Pantry is going to be closing to the public just for the night. Paris, we're going to have more from the executive director here about how this community pantry has been helping people this week, of course, but also during the pandemic. But for now, back to you.
Boy, Brandis, those pictures of trees uprooted just looks devastating. But as the mayor said there, you see the best come out in people in tragedies like this. All right, thanks. We'll check in with you in just a bit. And still to come on Chicago Tonight, the leaders behind the proposal to rename Lakeshore Drive are willing to compromise, but there's a stipulation. That and more following yesterday's heated city council meeting. It doesn't end well in the movies, but researchers in Russia have revived microscopic creatures frozen in Arctic permafrost for 24,000 years. Jeffrey Bayer tackles the angles, names, and stories behind Chicago's street system in this week's Ask Jeffrey.
I have forgotten that song. How does it go again?
Where have all the flowers gone? That's how it goes.
Oh, come on. I was hoping you'd sing a little longer.
And as Phil Ponce gets set to move from regular weekly segments to special assignments, in tonight's Ponce Moments, we look back at some of our favorite arts and culture encounters. But first, some more of today's top stories. President Biden announces a bipartisan compromise on infrastructure. The president made the announcement with a group of 10 senators from both sides of the aisle today. The deal is much smaller than the nearly $2 trillion plan he originally proposed. This one calls for about $973 billion in funds for transportation, water infrastructure, and broadband.
That I'm prepared to do whatever needs to get done to move the country forward. That's what I did with the American Rescue Plan, which was $1.9 trillion. Let me say this. When we can find common ground, though, working across party lines, that is what I will seek to do.
Rescue crews are searching for survivors after a 12-story building collapsed just outside Miami early today. Officials say there are at least 99 people unaccounted for after a part of the Champlain Tower's south condo collapsed at around 1:30 a.m. in the town of Surfside. At least one is dead, according to reports, but that number could rise dramatically. President Biden says he's activated FEMA to be ready to assist if the Florida governor requests it. The leaders behind the effort to rename Lakeshore Drive for Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable say they'll agree to a compromise on a new plan, but only if the vote happens tomorrow. This after yesterday's fiery city council meeting. WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with more. All right, so Heather, what does this latest plan call for?
Well, Lakeshore Drive would become Du Sable Lakeshore Drive on the outer drive from 67th Street in Woodlawn all the way up to Hollywood Avenue in Edgewater. But as you said, this is a deal only available tomorrow and only if there's an end to the parliamentary shenanigans that have delayed this vote twice already.
And why was that plan delayed again yesterday? Remind us.
Well, there was a dispute over the confirmation of Mayor Lori Lightfoot's pick to lead the city's law department, Celia Meza. That prompted the mayor and her allies to abruptly adjourn the meeting and schedule a new meeting for 1 p.m. tomorrow, where we'll all head back to City Hall and try to see if the city council can actually get some stuff done.
And there's still some lingering anger over that abrupt ending of that meeting yesterday. 22 alder people sent a letter to the mayor with a pointed request. One of the signatories on that letter was Alderman Ed Burke. What do these alder people want?
Well, they basically accused Lightfoot of trampling democracy in Chicago by selectively using the rules of procedure on the council floor to benefit her allies and her initiatives. And they say that it reached a head yesterday and that they will not tolerate it anymore. And they urged her to work more collaboratively with them or face the consequences.
We'll see what those consequences even are. Heather, we are out of time, but quickly, is this compromise going to pass tomorrow?
I left my crystal ball in the other room, Paris. Your guess is as good as mine.
Oh, all right. Well, Heather, thank you so much anyway for filling us in. Thank you.
Thanks, Paris.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website. It's all at WTTW.com/news. And up next, a roundup of stories making waves in the world of science. So stay with us.
Coverage of science and technology on Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Joel M. Friedman, president of the Alvin H. Baum Family Fund.
Researchers in Russia revived creatures frozen in Arctic permafrost for more than 20,000 years. A new vaccine for malaria, the powerful connection between music and memory, and how laughing gas is being used to treat severe depression. Joining us now to help unpack some of the latest science stories making headlines is University of Chicago paleontologist Neil Shubin. Neil, thank you for joining us. Good to see you. And let's talk about these Arctic zombies. They're called rotifers. First of all, they were frozen in permafrost for 24,000 years. What is a rotifer?
A rotifer is a single-celled creature with hairs around its mouth, and that's why it's called rotifers, and they always twitch a little bit. And they are pretty common, and they're very common up in the Arctic, actually.
So how did scientists revive them?
So what they did is they dug in the permafrost, about 11 feet into the permafrost, which is frozen tundra. So this is frozen stuff. And they used chemical analyses to tell it that it was 24,000 years old. So they've been frozen in ice for 24,000 years. They brought them out, okay, and then they put them in a little dish, and they let them thaw them out very gradually in the dish. And then after a while, they looked under a microscope and they saw swimming rotifers. and they were reproducing. So then they were not only, they were thriving, they're back.
Oh my goodness. So how did they develop this ability to go to sleep or whatever the term is, for 24,000 years and then come back?
It's called cryptobiosis, which is literally sort of a suspended animation. Their life processes completely stop. And they can just sit frozen like that for obviously 24,000 years, maybe even more. And what happens is they have a series of proteins that sit inside their cells that allows them to freeze over and prevents damage. And the damage that happens when they're frozen, the damage that happens when their life processes stop, and the damage that happens when they thaw, because all those things can wreak havoc on a cell, but these proteins protect them.
So what is the end game here? What are some of the possible implications of this?
Well, think about what these proteins do. They protect cells. They can put cells in suspended animation. It would be really fabulous if we can do this and leverage that for wound healing in people and to basically increase the vitality of our cell.
Well, let's move on to the next topic that's making headlines, and this has to do with the new medicine for malaria. This is researchers at Walter Reed Army Institute of Research have developed this new vaccine. What's wrong with the old ones?
Well, they didn't work very well. So what happens is they would wear off and they wouldn't be very effective. And malaria is such a scourge, right? I mean, over 200 million people get it every year. Almost 500,000 people die from it. And yet there's no vaccine that can really work against it, at least until now, we think.
So this malaria was tested on mice, seems to be successful. How did they create this vaccine?
Yeah, it's an mRNA vaccine. Remember, if you've had the Pfizer vaccine or the Moderna vaccine, those are mRNA vaccines. And what it is a little molecule of mRNA in a sort of fat globule. And that's what it is. And what it does is it enters the bloodstream and it causes the body to make a protein that mimics that's on the cell of Plasmodium, which is the bug that causes malaria, which then you can develop antibodies and then destroy the bug. Now, this works in mice, and so it's a long step to see what happens to people, but it's extremely promising.
Let's talk about music and memory. Researchers at the University of California, Davis, have found a link between music and memory. What did they do?
Okay, well, you ever have like a musical tone that just sits in your head and you can't get it out?
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah,
the Chicago Tonight theme.
Yeah, exactly. So they're called earworms. And what they did is they found a relationship between the development of earworms and memory. What they did is they took University of California, Davis students, and they played music for them 1 week. And then a week later, they played them a movie, which they hadn't seen before, with that music again. And they had another group of students where they didn't play any music at all, and they just saw the movie. And then they did a survey, and they asked if the students developed earworms or not, the music that sticks in your head. And it turns out that the students who developed an earworm to the music, that is, couldn't get the music out of their head, also remembered the movie extremely well. That is, like they just saw it yesterday. And they had a long-term recall of it. That is, if they were probed about the movie like a month later, they still remembered it. So there's something about this relationship between music and long-term memory.
Scientists have known about that for some time, that there is a connection between music and memory. And a recent example was a very moving video that went viral showing a former ballerina who had dementia, and music from Swan Lake was being played on our headphones, and we also see video of her from 40 or 50 years ago when she was actually performing it. Are there potential clinical applications for this work?
Well, that video is incredibly powerful, because what you'll notice is as they play the music, even though she has a very profound Alzheimer's, she had full muscle memory of being a dancer. Her face had the evocative emotions. She was able to recall long-term memories. So the idea is, music therapy has been around for a while, but can we really sort of target it to people in such a way that we can identify tunes that evoke memories for them in particular? Because we each have tunes that we like. We each have ones that sit in our heads in different ways, and we're all very different. So can we target this to people in some ways that we can help them with memories, in particular in people that have memory loss, which is a growing problem, because as we get older, neurodegenerative diseases are only more common. So we're going to need therapies.
Speaking of therapies, laughing gas to treat depression. Some colleagues at yours at U Chicago have found a novel way to treat severe depression. And what have they discovered?
Yeah, so they did a study a few years ago where they gave people for an hour, they gave about 50% laughing gas, nitrous oxide gas to breathe. And it knocked the people out, but they discovered that a lot of them who had profound depression beforehand actually were relieved of the symptoms of depression for about 24 hours. Now, that was really promising, but the problem with that result was that the people often had side effects. They were nauseous, they had headaches, and so it really had downsides. So what they tried this time is they gave a 25% nitrous oxide gas to them for an hour, and the people would sleep during this period of time. Then when they removed it, they tested their signs of depression, for weeks later, and they found that there was a remission of depression, a partial or complete remission of depression for at least 2 weeks. So it was much more enduring than 24 hours. So it's extremely promising for people who may have intractable depression.
Do you think this is the sort of thing that might be used increasingly for treating short-term, anyway, people who don't respond to medication?
I think that's the plan. I think if people aren't responding to traditional medication, these kinds of therapies, this and ketamine and others, which people are trying, seem to have an effect with people who have intractable and profound depression.
Neil Shubin, thank you so much. Just want to say, on a personal level, it has been wonderful working with you over the years. As I said before we started this segment, you have tons of charisma, and you're super smart, so it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Phil. It's been a pleasure. It's been mine.
And now, Paris, we go back to you.
Thanks, Phil. And now we check back in with Brandis Friedman, who's co-anchoring tonight from suburban Woodridge as part of our In Your Neighborhood series. Brandis.
In Paris right now, we are joined by Laura Coyle. She's the executive director of the West Suburban Community Pantry. First, thank you for hosting us here in your warehouse this evening. Tell us about some of the changes that you all have made this week, especially to help residents recover.
Yeah, so immediately after the storms hit on Sunday, we gathered as a team here, and I mean, we were very grateful that our facility was still intact so that we could be here to serve the public. And we decided then that we would extend our hours this week, so we have additional hours for donation and for client service. And we also decided that we were going to basically waive any of our restrictions that we have on who can come to the pantry if they've been impacted by the storm. So it's really important that people know they can come to us and that we're an emergency resource in the community, and we're not going to have any limitations on who can come and visit us.
And when you say waive restrictions, you mean the income requirements that typically have to be met?
There's usually an income or an eligibility based on income that we ask of people, and so during a situation like this, that is, it doesn't really matter anymore. We just want to make sure we can get the resources out to people who need them.
How would you say the storm impacted residents that you were already serving?
So it's been really challenging. I mean, for residents we've been serving and for residents we're not. I mean, people all across the community have been impacted by this. Our people we're serving, our volunteers, everyone. We've had people come in for service just even today who, had anything from the roof blown off their house to they lost everything because they were out of power for several days. So whether or not it, damaged your property specifically, there's still an impact, a greater impact on people, even if it was the loss of power for a few days.
How would you describe the impact of the pandemic on the amount of people and the needs that they have?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the most challenging things about this is we were just sort of turning the corner from the pandemic. And when the pandemic hit last March, we, within a month, saw our numbers increase by double. So our numbers doubled, literally on the spot, essentially. And so we know that, and that's been pretty sustained. It started to level off just recently, and now this happens. I feel it's really important that we're here for the community. I feel really badly for everyone in the community who has, just getting back on their feet, and now something like this happens.
Did the pantry itself receive any damage?
We didn't receive any damage. We're very grateful for that. But literally, a mile this way and a mile that way, it's just decimated.
What are you anticipating, down the road as far as needs? I know obviously the Red Cross is in the area right now, but what's next in the weeks ahead?
Yeah, so we're really an agency that's here for the long haul. So as people, are using the Red Cross's services right now for that immediate relief, we're the agency who's here in the community once that sort of moves on and they need to start getting back on their feet. So we're anticipating we're going to see an increase in the number of people visiting us, the number of people asking us to connect them to other agencies and services in the community, and probably a good 6-month time frame for people to really get back on their feet.
And before I let you go, what other ways, beyond food, are you stepping up to help the folks in need here?
Yeah, so we have food, diapers, pet food, cleaning supplies. We also have a service where we can connect people with things like gas cards, other organizations in the area that provide financial assistance, or or even shelter, we can connect people to those services. So we have a hotline that we've set up where basically people can call in, they press 0 on the number, and essentially someone will answer here and connect them to the services they need.
Okay. Comprehensive access. My thanks to Laura Coyle and the team here for letting us hang out here tonight. We appreciate it. Paris, we'll be back to wrap things up with you in just a bit, but for now, back to you.
All right, Brandis, thanks very much. And up next, Jeffrey Bayer tackles the Chicago street grid in an encore presentation of Ask Jeffrey. But first, we take a look at the weather.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part through the generous support of the Julius Frankel Foundation.
Angles, curves, one-ways, and dead ends. Chicago's street system has long been a source of pride for the city's residents, and its history and quirks date back to before Chicago was even founded. Jeffrey Bayer is here with more in this week's Ask Jeffrey. Welcome back, Jeffrey.
Thanks, Brandis. Good to see you.
So we have two related questions this week. The first one, why are streets on the south side numbered while streets on the north side have names? That one comes to us from Sue Montgomery in Chicago. And the other question is, Chicago has several prominent angled streets that stick out against its grid system. Was the city built around these streets? And what would the city be like without them? Good question from Stasia Cano from Chicago. Jeffrey.
So the street grid is an integral part of every Chicagoan's life, whether you really realize it or not. As the question mentions, you probably know that east-west streets on Chicago's north side have names like Division and Lawrence, while almost all of the east-west streets on the south side are numbers, like 47th Street, 79th Street, and so forth. The story behind Chicago's street names dates back to the city's early days when the city was split into three parts. We had a North Division, a South Division, and a West Division. Now, streets in the South Division at one time did have names, but as Chicago started growing, things got pretty messy. The city was rapidly gobbling up surrounding townships, and this resulted in a whole lot of duplicate street names and addresses, a nightmare for civic planning, let alone mail delivery. So finally, in 1861, to limit the confusion, Chicago's City Council passed an ordinance to officially rename the streets only in the South Division, later known as the South Side, as numbers. Chicago cartographer and a good friend of ours here, Dennis McClendon, says one reason that they only renamed streets in the South Division could be because many of the original names were just kind of ordinary, like Bridge Street or Old Street. This was in contrast to North Side streets, which were more likely to be named for prominent citizens and early Chicagoans. So it might have been seen as sort of disrespectful to remove those names, although I have to say in later years, many of those names were changed anyway. Another reason could be that city leaders basically expected Chicago mostly to expand to the south. And this means that numbers would just be more convenient as the city expanded to just add more numbered streets. But the headaches weren't really over. Additional annexations led to still more instances of multiple addresses. And this was finally resolved in the early 20th century, thanks to an intrepid urban planner, actually an amateur urban planner. His name was Edward P. Brennan. Brennan proposed starting a centralized street numbering system, unifying the street numbering all over the city, with the axis being State and Madison streets in the loop, an idea that the city began adopting in 1908. Dennis McClendon, our cartographer, did point out another proposal from around that same time, which would have also replaced North Side street names with numbers. On this map, Foster Avenue, this is an old real estate map, is actually labeled, or it's also labeled 59th, North 59th Street, and that's extra strange today because Foster is actually 5200 North.
That would have been really confusing. So then there are the diagonal streets, Jeffrey. How do those fit in?
Well, many of Chicago's angled streets and avenues like Clark, Lincoln, Archer, Vincennes actually follow former Native American trails. And then these became streets when non-native settlers came into the area. And they turned them, in some cases, into what were called plank roads, like roads made of wooden planks. And then the grid was sort of built right across these angled thoroughfares, sort of absorbing them into the city.
Okay, so then what about the last part of this question? What would Chicago be like without these angled streets?
Well, it might be harder to get around, I would think. Imagine having to zigzag through a rigid grid rather than cut across the southwest side on Archer or through the northwest side on Milwaukee. Diagonal streets were also key players in the development of many Chicago neighborhoods. They create massive intersections like the famous Six Corners in Portage Park, seen here. And they continue to be centers of commerce and community across the city.
All right, Jeffrey Bear, thanks so much as always.
My pleasure.
And don't forget that you can visit our website for more details about Chicago's street grid. And while you're there, don't forget to submit your own question to Jeffrey Bear. That's at WTTW.com/AskJeffrey. And we're back with more right after this.
As we've been talking about all week, Phil Ponce is stepping back from his twice-weekly appearances on Chicago Tonight and will move to doing special assignments for us at the end of the month. And we've been looking back at some memorable Ponce moments. You may think of Phil as a hard-boiled, straight-ahead newsman, but he's also excelled at talking about arts and culture. Here's a look.
And we're doing Somewhere, but in Spanish. Can I sing a little?
Yeah, please. Are you kidding?
No, the reason I want to is because it's, for some reason, and I think it has to do with the language, it's just more soulful in Spanish. It's like this.
Go ahead. Please.
Sé de un lugar difícil de encontrar, donde el silencio y la paz siempre vivirán. Doesn't that sound beautiful?
It's wonderful. Rita Moreno.
It is.
I think you're going to go on forever. and I watched.
I love your pocket stay.
Well, thank you very much.
But I'm not going to say anything about your tie.
Okay.
I'm not going to say anything about your tie. Last time you gave it to me.
I know.
Actually, how about this? I'm not fond of your tie.
Well, good. You know,
okay.
Besides, there's a one limit per customer.
Okay,
There's a one type of customer limit.
That was last time I was here. I told him how much nice his tie was. He gave it to me. So and no pocket stay. It's all good. You keep it. I like the look.
All right. Thank you.
You're a dapper gentleman.
Thank you very much.
You really are.
Thank you very much.
Do you enjoy that?
Huh?
Do you enjoy being dapper?
Well, it's television, and one does what one can. We taped a Mozart trumpet duet in which Mr. Larson graciously allowed me to toot my own horn. I'm Phil Ponce. Good night, and hope to see you next time. Bear with us.
So, of course, Judge Hoffman is sitting up there. And so he said, Miss Collins, and basically, what do you have to say for yourself? And he said, what did you say at the meeting of the Yippies? And I started singing, where have all the flowers gone? And the clerk's hand went over my mouth and shut me up. And he said I would have to be removed from the court. Now, that's all I remember. I was in shock. And then, as he read from the transcript, I went on and on talking, and Kunstler said, well, why don't you just read the lyrics?
Right,
which I did.
And you went on to read the lyrics. I have forgotten that song. How does it go again?
Where have all the flowers gone? That's how it goes.
Oh, come on. I was hoping you'd sing a little long. John Cleese, you were very first tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was fun.
And Phil's back with us now. Phil, some of the lighter moments in your career here, what goes through your mind when you watch some of that?
Well, good question, because I sort of whipsawed between laughter, and I wanted to cry. When Rita Moreno sang that song to me, I remembered the profound impact that the movie West Side Story had on me as a kid. It just blew me away when I saw it. And then, with Judy Collins, my gosh, who my age didn't have a crush on her? And then John Cleese.
And I saw your mouth drop when they showed you playing the trumpet.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe I had the nerve to play a duet with one of the finest trumpeters in the nation. So having seen how much fun I had doing that, I've changed my mind. I'm staying.
Right, get the statement ready. Get the statement prepared. How red were your cheeks? How hard did you blush interviewing Rita Moreno there?
Oh my gosh, to have Rita Moreno sing to you, it was sublime, and it's one of the highlights of my being here. One of many highlights. One of the many perks of the job. All right, Phil, and we'll have more Ponce moments next week, including a memorable conversation with Barack Obama. And Phil's last regular bi-weekly appearance on Chicago Tonight will be next Tuesday. And we're back to wrap things up right after this. And before we go, a sad note. Our longtime colleague, producer Nicolette Ferry, died yesterday. Nicolette was with WTTW from 1988 until 2016. She was a 5-time Emmy Award winner who worked on diverse projects, from sneak previews and soundstage to collaborations with musician David Broza for PBS to work right here for Chicago Tonight. Our thoughts are with her husband Tom, her family, and her many, many friends. And that is our show for this Tuesday night.
Please join us tomorrow night at 7 for the Week in Review. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.